show my sauce in different ways.
Hey, nice. Good answer. That's what we'll title this piece, Showing Our Sauce in Different Ways. Before I introduce y'all or you introduce yourself, we always start the same way. What is liberation?
Liberation. Liberation to me is like a feeling, right? It's a feeling of complete freedom and access to exist without those barriers and limitations. It's like without sin fronteras is how I imagine it.
Are you liberated?
Ah, not yet.
Now, me neither. But yeah, I love that, right? Complete freedom. What does Nina Simone say? No fear.
No fear.
She
Yeah.
says freedom is no fear.
Yeah. It's like agency to just be in any way you want.
Sin fronteras. That's your memoir title.
Sin fronteras.
Tell people, who are you? What are you about? What are you interested in? Who are you today?
Who am I today? I'm Odalis Jasmine. It's the middle of summer and my AC broke, so we're hot over here. Today who am I? Who am I all about? I'm all about my community, all about Latinidad, all about my brown folks in every shade, and all about representing our stories and who we really are, the intricacies of our identity, culture, how we navigate it, how we own it, how we embrace it, how we flip it and change it. I'm really inspired by people like you, people who I've interviewed in the past who are so willing to be vulnerable and real about who they are and their story. And I think we need more real in this world. I think it's the step toward liberation, right? Realness. Who am I today? Today, I've been talking a lot about womanhood today. And I think like when you ask me the question, like, are you liberated? I'm like, ooh, we just had a conversation about this. I don't think I am. I don't think any of us are just yet, maybe some in different capacities. But today I'm really heavily leaning into my womanhood and just embracing all that comes with being a Latina.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. You have a podcast. I don't think you mentioned it. You said you interview people. You interviewed me. What is it? And yeah, what's your community?
Podcast? Yeah, my podcast is Hella Latina or Hella Latino, Hella Latina. It is spelled with an @ at the end. And the podcast has been around for 4 years now. It's the 4-year birthday. Happened last month. And it's again centered on what I mentioned, highlighting our community and talking about the intricacies of culture, identity, and how we navigate it.
And why'd you start it?
For many reasons. For myself, if I'm being honest, I started it because I think that I was missing community during the pandemic. I think that's when a lot of our babies came to fruition. But I was missing this piece of culture for a long time. And I think you grow up in it and you don't realize how valuable it is, right? I grew up in a very Honduran household, but I was born in the US and grew up here. And so I had a very different experience than my brothers, sisters, parents, tias, cousins, right? Like I was one of the very few that was born and raised here. And so I grew up in this really beautiful culture. And then I went outside of my home and then I was existing in a different world where Spanish wasn't the dominant language. And there was a mixture of different cultures and different expectations and different narratives. And like, it was just so different for me. It felt like I was in this very rich household. And then I went to school and it was just different. It was different. But I didn't think of it at the time. It was just life. It was just me existing. And then I finally got to college, and I think that college was a time for me of rebranding. I think a lot of people try to come in to college space and they're like, I'm a rebrand, I'm gonna be someone else. And I think that that's what my intention was. Like, I want to go to college and I don't want to be that poor girl from Southeast San Diego. I want to be this like new and mature and blah, blah, blah. And I strayed so far from my roots and strayed so far from who I was, trying to be someone that I thought looked successful, that I thought was the first generation excellence. And then I realized who I am. My superpower is my roots. It's my culture. It's where I come from. It's the community that raised me, the hood that raised me. And that is what makes me me. And it made life so much easier. And there was a little bit of liberation with just owning who I am and where I come from. And being so like proud of it. Like, I don't have to change how I look. I don't have to change how I speak. I don't have to change anything about me. If anything, who I am can attract good, and it can attract what I actually really want in my life. So yeah, I started because I wanted more people to share their own stories of navigating that.
And you found these people, I'm assuming.
Yes, look at you right here.
I feel like we're all living in a Spike Lee movie right now. You know how like a lot of Spike Lee movies take place in the heat?
Yes, that's how I feel. I was like starting to get a little sweaty on the lip. I was like, okay, let me open up a window.
I wonder, I think about a lot like why Spike chooses heat as the backdrop of a lot of his films, and sweat and what heat does to us, and the places it pushes us, and
why do you think so?
The things we do to get comfy, you know, and to find comfort in heat, which are a little different than the things we do in cold. I don't know why Spike does it. If I were to jump in Spike's mind right now, why would I say Spike chooses the heat as the backdrop for change? Because I think heat, we're always building heat. Like, heat is a catalyst of change, meaning there's that phenomenon. It's not a phenomenon, it's just science. Like, after a snowstorm and it's ice, and it's like ice, and then one day you walk out and it's water, it's a puddle, and you're like, the ice didn't look like it was melting at all, but one day it was just a puddle, but internally it was building heat, and it built enough heat from the inside that it all just sort of becomes a puddle. And I think that's us when it comes to change, when it comes to liberation, when it comes to finding our realness or being our realness, or the shit that we just don't want to deal with anymore. Like, we're just building heat internally, right? Until we melt, until a part of us melts, or something we're afraid of melts, or something, you know, we no longer need melts. And I want to say that that's a more powerful or healing force than building ice. Like, if we're building ice on the inside, that's not great. That might not be great. As a metaphor, like, we don't need to become frozen and cold. We have enough of those people.
Way too many.
Yeah. But building heat can also, like in Spike's films, right, can be violent or can be loving.
Yeah.
Like, melting can make you more compassionate, or it can make you more angry.
I think maybe it can both coexist at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking about it in terms of my journey, right? I just shared a little bit of like going to college, trying to be someone else, and trying to like stray so far away from, like, I don't want to be put in this box of being, that like Latina girl from the hood. So I was changing a little bit of my accent. I was like moving a little different. And trying to just hide myself so much that when I remember the day that I graduated and I was working this job thinking, you know, mama, I made it. Like, I graduated, I did the thing, I followed all the rules, I did it step by step, I did it on time, whatever. And then I got there and I was like, Christopher, cuando te digo, like, when I tell you that I was so deeply unhappy, and talking about that heat, I felt like I hit like the rock bottom that people talk about. And I was like trying to figure out, why did I work my ass off, 3 jobs in school, to get to this place that I thought I wanted to be at, only to be here and I don't want it. And so what do I want? Because my whole life people have told me, have put expectations on me of what it is that was expected of me. And to fight your whole life growing up in a very Latin community, in a very poor community as well, not just Latin, I thought my only options were to become a mom, a housewife, because those are the women I grew up with. And there was nothing wrong with that. I was actually like, yeah, that's my future. It is what it is. And then I started to get older and I'm like, I have options. Oh, I can go to college, or I'm gonna go to college. Oh, I'm gonna make all the money in the world. I'm a get my family out the hood. Like it was so much of that, right? And then I feel like I was living my life through other people's eyes consistently. And so I got to that place and I'm like, man, what do I want? What is my generational cycle going to look like? What kind of lineage do I want to build? It's like I was asking myself my American dream, right? Like, what do I want? And
What
it
is
was
your
like,
American dream? Yeah.
I think funny. I think it is complete liberation in terms of waking up every day doing what I love, and not be so honed in on money, because money is so temporary, and money can do a lot. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, money doesn't buy happiness. I think I can buy some things that make you happy for sure, but it's short term, right? It's short lived. So my American dream is to be able to dream and to play and to live a life and career full of passion and zest, and be able to do things that my parents couldn't do, whatever that means.
And what's the relationship between? So I do a lot of things I love, and I genuinely do love them. Like I love art making. I love that I get to be an artist. I love that somehow, some way, people believe in me enough to help me make the things I want to make and write the things I want to make. And in the moments that I'm doing those things actively, I'm very present. I don't even go for the word happiness. Like I'm present. And when I feel present in my life, I feel joy. I feel worry. I just feel things deeply. But I'm deeply present, and that feels alive. Like that feels like living, to be in it, to be in a moment. And then I'm not in those moments because I can't be in them 24/7. I've tried. It hasn't happened yet. I have to do other things like walk my dog, like just live or
you don't love
for the
that?
next gig. No, I actually do. The dog thing makes me present. Dogs are amazing that way, actually. But so what is that? How do you actually? I was really depressed last week, and maybe it's my birthday coming up. I had just come off.
Oh, you're a Leo.
I'm a Leo, okay. Yeah.
My birthday's coming up too. I'm a Leo.
Sick. When's yours?
August 21st. I'm a cuss.
July 28th.
Oh.
Around the bend. And I just came off of a month of basically straight art making. Like, I was traveling. All I did was just like make art for a month. And then I was like, I was bummed. I was sad. I had this high and I was kind of beating myself up about it. I was like, maybe I'm not getting the formula right. Maybe my dharmic practice isn't working. Maybe I'm chasing too much stuff, and my partner said, first of all, it is such a gift that you even have one thing in your life that can make you that present. Like, that's super cool. She, she was like, that doesn't happen on the reg for people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And also, if you talk about liberation and realness and all this stuff, it's not in the feeling of consistent. It's in being present in this moment of like, damn, how cool I get to do something like that. But also I just get to be here and be bored.
I was just going to say it's being present in those lows as well. Like it's, I'm always careful because I don't want it to seem like, oh, my American dream is to live in this like unicorn filled land and nothing ever goes wrong. It's life. Life is full of those ups and downs and those turns. But I think that the real, freedom for me is to be able, and that's why I started with like, I want the freedom to dream, because I think for a long time I grew up thinking I have to choose one path. I have to do one thing for the rest of my life, right? And then you hear like the doctors, the lawyers, like you have to choose one career and stay there forever. And I'm such a creative that I've loved a lot of different things, similar to you. Like I love living a life of creativity. Maybe when I was younger, I really loved working in social media. This is just an example. I never loved it, but like I love social media. And then now I'm like, oh, I really want to be a writer. I mean, one of my favorite examples is growing up, my dad really wanted me to be a singer. I'm convinced he wanted me to be a superstar. he was a singer back in Honduras, and so he like trained me to be a singer. He would like sing with me every day, and like he would teach me technique, and I really loved that time with my dad. One thing he said changed my life though. He told me, Mira, like anyone can be a singer, anyone can learn these techniques, anyone can be great. But what separates the great singers from the incredible singers that will live forever are the ones that know how to interpret the words. So he would make me sit there and interpret the words in Spanish. Like I was reading these like lines and like literally 8 years old reading lines about love. I'm like, okay, I feel it. But I fell in love so much with the words that that's what I chose my career to be, the power of words, whether I'm speaking it, writing it, creating it. I fell in love with words. And so I think that the balance sometimes of the highs and lows is that you always remember your purpose and you're present in your purpose. And your purpose isn't going to be, like you said, 24/7. Sometimes your purpose is going to be, hey, you sit down and Netflix and that's cool. Or maybe you don't feel that good about yourself one day, but are you still living out your purpose? Will you still live it the next day? So I think there's a sense of groundedness in like your why and why you're doing the things that you're doing, in my opinion.
I also believe in that it's okay to shift in the grandeur of what we ask for, or not even the grandeur, the specificity of what we ask for. I always talk about Father Greg Boyle, maybe Father John. I think it's Father Greg, Homeboy Industries. We'll just say Father Boyle. And he's the founder of Homeboy Industries, and he has this prayer, and he says, every day I pray that God humiliates me. He says, because if you humiliate me enough, I have nothing. There's nothing. There's no fear. There's no fear. This for this Nina Simone freedom. There's nothing I can fear, right? And I've always been just enamored by this prayer because I know I don't have the courage to ask for it.
Yeah.
Because if you ask for things in this life, you often do receive them, and they might not look the way you wanted them to look. And so one of the things I'm currently devoted to, because most of my life was just like, I just want to be a working artist. That was it. I was like, most of my life was dedicated to that. Like, I want to have fun and be a working artist. And now I've evolved to, I want liberation. I want to know what that tastes like and feels like in an intimate way. And one of the scary things about that is when you ask for things like that, you might have it, but it might not be what your mind thought it was.
Absolutely. And it might shift. Again, what I think liberation is and feels like right now may be different down the line. And it has already been, I mean, it comes in seasons, right? Like right now, there's liberation that I feel in being in my singleness and being completely alone and being totally not just okay with it, but like living fully in it. Whereas before I was booed up and I did not know what that felt like, So there's, I think, seasons and liberation can come in different ways, but it's so interesting you say the fear component, because that's something that my therapist knows. I am flooded with fear, but I'm always combating it every single day. That is my forever struggle of like combating my anxiety, combating my fear, and being able to live in my full expression, which is not always easy to do, but it's a consistent choice I make every single morning. So to live without fear, I'm like, what is that? What is that? How does that feel like?
When you say combat it, you mean like the combating for you is to silence its voice, or maybe to silence its power, to
listen to it,
to see it, but not have to let it shake you.
Yeah, because fear fundamentally is trying to protect you. And I believe one of my favorite things is spending time with my nieces and nephews, because they feel so fearless to me. Like when they're little, they just have no fear in the world. Like we were at the pool and my little nephew, who's literally a year old, he was about to jump in the deep end, like nothing. And I was like, oh my God. And I think sometimes unintentionally or intentionally as adults, we start to create that fear in kids, right? Again, we're trying to protect them. Don't jump into the deep end. But sometimes what that does is we internalize it and then we just live our life in fear. And growing up youngest of seven, being the only one that's documented, there was a fear of, I had a fear of La Migra, and I was fine.
Mm.
Like, I had a fear of like the police coming by. I had a fear of being outside my home for, after sunset. Like, I had a lot of fears that protected me. So now when I have them and they come up for me in different forms, I remind myself, okay, I hear you. I hear you voice the fear. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect me, but I got this. And it's a constant, maybe combat's not the right word, but it's a conversation with it. And it's not me ever trying to silence it or like kick it to the curb. It's more of like, I hear you and I got this. It's training myself to live abundantly.
Or all you can share as many of these as you want. Are all your fears physical, or are they?
No.
Yeah. What are the other fears that are not like? Yeah.
I totally got fears. I have a lot of fears. I have a lot of fears around love. I think love right now is one thing that I have a big fear around. Yeah, that's been like the one that's been most present and kind of facing me right now.
Is it a fear that it might not arrive? A fear that it's not what you thought it was? A fear what?
A fear that it's not what I thought it was, that it may look different than what I maybe idolized in my head. Yeah, and just trying to shape and shift in my head of and dream, like, what could it look like? What does it feel like? And then being okay if it feels just a little bit different.
It will be different than what you thought in your head.
But I just think it always, I mean, it's not this like princess save me prince type of like idea. It's more of like, what do I want love to actually feel like? Do I want it to feel like liberation? Do I want it to feel like home? Do I want it to feel like a fireplace? Do I want it to feel exciting? Like, I guess there's a lot of question marks around love, and so there's a lot of fear around it. And the thing about fear for me and the way I interpret it and carry it, it's a sense of control, right? Like, for me, growing up in an environment I couldn't control made me super ultra controlling in my life, in my relationships, in a lot of different dynamics. And it's something that I've unlearned over the years. And I think I've gotten really good at it. But something that drives a lot of my fear is the unknown. So I try to like consistently, like, what is it? Like, I try to know something so that I don't have fear around it, but there's things that you don't know and you have to be okay with it. There's a lot of things you don't know.
The unknown is the most like magical place that, we often talk about. Circle square. How can I explain this? Like, we live inside of squares. Squares are what we know. It's our knowing. But circles that surround the square are our play range, and we have to play more in order to sort of expand our knowing. And then you create a new knowing. Once you enter a new unknown, you create a new knowing, and you're like, now I know this. This is my box. And then you have to play more, or we always talk about, like, you have to feel safe enough in order to walk into the unknown. Like, you're not going to change spiritually, sexually, financially, career-wise, friendships, those won't change until you walk into the unknown. But you got to feel safe enough to walk into the unknown.
But, that's why I love spending so much time with my nephews, because my nephew trying to jump into the deep end, I see him as an example. It's so random, but I'm like, I just want to have that fearlessness that he has and just jump into things. And if I think about, and I don't give myself enough credit, Christopher, like, there's moments in my life where I have jumped into the deep end and I have made decisions, taken risks, and things always turn out way better than I imagine it. And that's what literally, like, when I'm waking up every morning and there's a little bit of fear, I'm like, girl, but remember that time that you were fearless and you just stepped into it and how beautiful life was? Like, it's a conversation, and I journal every morning for this reason. Like, it's a conversation I have with myself, reminding myself of the abundance that exists on the other side of fear. Like, there's so much abundance. There's so much like that can happen if you just open yourself up to it and have that innocence, that fearlessness of a little kid just trying to jump into the deep end.
Yeah, little kids are, I mean, care about how you said the sentence, but like, they are these wizards of not knowing. And so when they're not knowing, they're either like, and they're also wizards of patience. And it's one of the beautiful things about, just life.
Are they patient? Because I don't know about my nephews.
Yes, maybe not all of them. I think about, because I often just return to basically the same little girl. When I say patience, I think of when kids move slowly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think of them, they're not in a rush to get somewhere. So they might not be patient in the sense of like, now that I see that toy exists, I want that toy.
Yeah.
But when they're on the walk and they're putting their hands in dirt, or they find a puddle and that's interesting, like the adult is on the rush. The adult has to get from A to B, but the kid doesn't really have to get to B, because the kid is in this process.
Yeah.
And that to me is really magnificent. Like that to me is also a form of liberation. And in relationships, I think one of the things you can do to really curse a relationship is to try and get to B or C, as if there's some place you're supposed to get to, which the movies told you there was.
Yeah.
But all that any person wants from another person is their presence.
Yes. Yes.
Until we don't want to do, and until that evolves into something else.
Until we don't.
Yeah.
No, I mean there is a sense of like curiosity that kids have that I equated to liberation. And when I said earlier in the conversation, like I want a life full of play, like that's what I mean. I want a life full of curiosity. I don't want to do the same thing for the rest of my life. I want to play and have fun and do and try different things. The creative in me is always looking for something new. And I also relate it back to being a first generation Latina. Like there's a lot of things that I grew up not knowing that I was interested in, because you don't know what you don't know. And so there is a sense of curiosity for me in that respect. And that's, if you look at my resume, if you look at all the things that I've done, the things I've been a part of, or even the things I do now, you'll see like I am living in full play mode. Like I am just doing a bunch of different things that fill my cup, because they all satisfy a different part of me.
Travel a lot. Do I make that up?
I travel a lot. And speaking of your depressive state, sorry you were going through that. And I hope you've come out the other side. I was traveling a lot. So I like started January through, I think it was April. I was like on planes every week. Like I spent more time on planes than I did in my own home. And I loved it. Oh my God. I was like living my best life, because I think when I travel, that's where all of like that curiosity play comes through. And you're completely in the unknown. Like I don't know London, but I'm walking around the streets of London. I don't know Brazil, but I'm walking around the streets of, there's a sense of like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm like exploring. And when I came back and I've been on a hiatus of not traveling, I was really depressed for a minute. I was like, I'm just going to be home. Like, what? And then I started to like incorporate play in my life. So I'm like, what can I do that what am I yearning to do right now? What do I want to do? And so I started working out, and like that's my place of presence, where I'm like, I'm working out and I'm just fully present in this workout, and I'm with my trainer and we're having a good time. And it's a way for me to play. It's almost like a little gym, right? For like adults. And I'm writing a lot, journaling a lot, spending a lot of time with my nephews, with my family. And so I've tried to incorporate play in different ways and know that play doesn't come from one source, it comes from multiple.
Can I go back to, you talked about realness, being real, and a lot of people aren't real. And one of the first steps to liberation is being real. Have you ever read the book, How to Do Nothing?
No, The Art of Doing Nothing.
There's a book, How to Do Nothing, by Jenny Odell.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. We all think we have to be something because of social media. We have to have a bio. We have to have a persona, an opinion. Yeah. We have to take a stance, but what if you didn't need to be anything for anyone and you just were, right? If you weren't performing who you are. And so my question about realness is, can we be real and still present the idea of a fixed self? because there's nothing fluid or actually kind of playful about anything that you've prepared to put in a little box. It's static. It's literally static. It's frozen. If
Yeah.
we're talking about warmth, it's not moving. It's static.
Yeah.
It's a static representation of self. It's an old self. It's never a present self. It's always old because it's not, because it's a picture. And so can we be real and engage with those platforms?
What a question. What a question. Yes and no. I say yes only because I think there's a lot of people who are my interpretation of real. There's a lot of people who I think are very open and authentic on the platform. Very, very few in my opinion. But I say no at the same time because they're also giving us a curated version of them. In that scenario, right? I can think that's the realest girl in my life that I've seen on the platform, but I also know that she's portraying a curated version, even if it's unfiltered or if it's authentic. Maybe she's not wearing makeup, maybe she's being like super like a stream of consciousness, but at the same time, it's still a curated version. So can both coexist? I'm all big on that. I'm like, can both be
I think 100% yes, and we can hold opposing ideas at the same time. Like things can coexist. We can both be afraid and courageous. My opinion is yes and, right? Like I think both things can coexist, but I lean a lot towards reminding myself and reminding others that it is all premeditated. It is all considered. It is all, to use the hashtag for the gram, right? Versus life. For life, and not even for life. Life is just sort of happening. And this goes back to an old therapy session where, someone was like, you need to be more vulnerable. And I was like, I'm fucking great at vulnerability. Like, I make art. I tell people all my art is based on my actual life. Like I'm fucking the most vulnerable. I've told thousands of people things, that you wouldn't tell anybody. And then I told this to my therapist, and my therapist was like, no, that's performative vulnerability. You built up the courage because you wrote it, you created it. Vulnerability is in the moments you're not prepared to share. Vulnerability is when you need to show up and be present, and you can't write a script for it. And that's my relationship to social media. I think like it's always performative.
Always.
It can't not be performative just by the nature of the beast. It is performative. Now, there is a version back in the day. It doesn't exist anymore, except there is one woman who I will not name, but me and a friend always laugh about this woman's account because she still uses Instagram like it was intended. Remember when you just put a picture? You didn't think about it. You didn't
care.
You just put something, bad angles, terrible lighting. But that doesn't really exist anymore, except for this one woman that me and someone else know who this person is, who doesn't give a fuck.
I love it. Love it.
Doesn't give a fuck. Now that is a woman of an older generation, like has nothing to prove, has quite successful in many different ways you can say it and put it. But otherwise, I think our generations, I think younger generations, it is all performative. And I think they look for their life. They look for things that can live up to the bar of performance. And so everything sort of gets filtered and washed out.
You also mentioned something interesting about this woman is an older generation. She has nothing to prove. Do you think that our generations are living with the sense of having something to prove?
Do I think that our generation is living with the sense of having something to prove? Capital yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need to prove that we're worthy, that we're alive, that we're enough, that we're seen. When you started comparing followers, right? People gather followers. It's a weird concept. It's a weird concept.
Weird.
And so if you have a follower, does that mean you're a leader? And if you're following someone, are they your leader? Many people might not call Kim Kardashian their leader, and yet they follow her. And so she's worthy of your following. These are powerful words. These are powerful words that have caused many wars and like battles and spiritual wars and race wars. And these are important things, right?
Yeah.
Followers and leaders. Some people followed, Martin Luther King on a long walk, and the Dalai Lama and Malcolm X, and so yes, I think we're trying to prove something, that we're worthy of being followed, which is so nuts because newsflash, 99% are not worthy of being followed. Just go live your life.
Yeah.
No one should be following you. Like you don't got much to offer me. And in your job, you weren't put on this earth to offer me something. You were put on this job to enjoy your life, to get free.
Yeah. That is so interesting because, I mean, as I related back to like my story of like going to college and trying to, what I was really trying to prove is that I was worthy to be in that space. That no, I wasn't that girl from the hood, because I didn't see anyone from the hood that made it out, that made it into this space that I wanted to be in. And so I thought I have to be like completely different, until I started to meet other people who were so authentically in their identity. And I'm like, how the hell are you doing it? How are you doing it? But I was always trying to prove something to somebody, until I finally looked in the mirror and I'm like, girl, what do you want? What do you want? Do you want a career in this path, or do you want to be a creative, or do you want to do both? Do you want to start your own business? Do you want to do a podcast? Like, I never asked myself any questions. I was always asking everyone else what they wanted from me, unintentionally, right? And I did it when I was younger, coming home and proving to my mom, my dad, like, oh, I got an award. I was always like, that's part of the first gen mentality, right? My parents sacrificed so much, so I have to do extra and go above and beyond. So I was never just part of the group. I was always trying to be the leader of the group. This concept of leading, right? Leading equaling like success, which debated. But I was always trying to prove something. And when I spoke about my fear around love, a lot of that fear actually does stem from my self-love journey, of my wavering self-love, right? And knowing that it's inconsistent sometimes with myself, with how I look at myself in the mirror. Sometimes I feel like I'm 10 out of 10 bomb and I'm walking around like I own the place. And then other days I'm like, ooh, girl, today's not the day. And so the wavering, I think, of life, and just realizing, like, in every high and low, what are you trying to prove to yourself and to other people? Like, being able to understand the dissonance there, I think, is important.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. That's the liberation, though. Once you understand it, you can choose.
Emptiness, exchanging self with others. That's like a meditation I've been doing lately, which is first you kind of like, you tear yourself apart, literally. You're just like, I'm not my hair follicles. I'm not my skin or my lips. You just sort of like, you tear it all apart. Right? You take out your trachea, your skin, your flesh, your chest, your hips, you don't all the things you say are beautiful about you take them away, right? And then you're just sort of like space. You're everything. If you're not stuck in your body, you're everybody's body, and you're everywhere.
Well, 100%. I mean, I always say, like, you could be fine as hell, but what about that soul? Like, I'm always thinking about, like,
you could be fine as hell. What about that soul?
I actually just posted a poem where I said that. I'm like, what about that soul, baby? Because to me, it's the soul, right? Like, all of this is so temporary. And the more conversations I have with my mom, oh my gosh, she's been such a beautiful person in my life these days. But speaking to my mom is like, you know what? Like, when I was your age, I wish I would have loved myself a little bit more. I wish I was a little kinder to myself. And so I, in a way, like, I'm really practicing that kindness of myself. How do I show myself compassion and show up for me the way I show up for others? And how do I love every season that I'm in? My body will change. My face will change. Sometimes gravity will change it for me. Like, how do I love it in every season? Because one time I'm gonna be old, I'm gonna be whatever, and I'm gonna look back at these pictures of when I was this age, and I'll be like, why was I so hard on myself? Like, why didn't I just love that season that I was in? And so that's the self-love journey that I've been on for years of like, how do I love every single season that I'm in, and speak kindly to myself in every season.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of liberation for me is there's this chant I really love: life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. Let us awaken. And time does pass swiftly and opportunity is lost.
Yeah.
And I would hate for so many people of our generation to be on some sort of proverbial passing bed. I won't call it deathbed, like some sort of proverbial moving on bed, and to think, fuck, I wasted so much time thinking about what I would post today. I wasted so much time caring what other people thought. I wasted so much time worrying, and I don't want to be in that proverbial passing on transformation stage and think I wasted so much time not loving, not loving another person, knowing that that other person is myself, not listening to another person. I don't want to waste time. That to me is my journey to liberation. We don't have as much time as we think.
At all.
So we got to walk like little kids, who like they're not in a rush to get somewhere.
Yeah. And, spending time with my family, I'm in a multi-generational family where I'm seeing kids from, a year old to my parents who are in their 60s, 70s, to their friends who are in 70s, 80s. I just celebrated my mom's best friend's 79th birthday. And so even being around older folks in my family and realizing time really is fleeting every single day. And they're thinking about different things now. They're looking back, they're reflecting, they have different conversations. They still have chisme from like back in the day where I'm like, okay, you guys can't come up with new new chisme. But to me, it's this beautiful reminder of the in-betweens of life. And I feel like I'm an in-between, right? In this multi-generational family, I'm kind of in the middle of like these two generations that are growing up so differently. How do I pull from both of them these lessons that I think will help me move through life, whether it's curiosity or wisdom, groundedness, or it's playfulness? Like, how do I have both, and how do I own both? Because you need both, right, to just move in this world.
You talked about all the things that were birthed during the pandemic. And I have a lot of friends, maybe you do as well, who miss that time.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to perform.
Oh,
they didn't have to perform going out or seeing people they didn't want to see, or like, they didn't have to perform, like, I got this gig, because no one got a gig. Like, there was no competition for the gig. Like, they didn't have to show anything. They just like got to be home and bake bread. Oh my God, they got to do something old, traditional. They got to fucking knit. They got to just live their life. They just got to live their life.
Yeah.
There was nothing performative about it, and look at all the things that were birthed because we met ourselves, because we were ourselves, because we were here. And I get a lot of wisdom from your mother, giving you that self-love lesson, because that was before cell phones. We've been battling self-love since the beginning of time. We all wanted someone in the tribe to love us. That's why we created tribe, to say we belong here, and we each have our place, and so if we're already battling that genetically, internally, regardless of outside stimuli, let's try and not make it harder on ourselves to love ourselves and to get free.
Oh my God. And that's a real liberation that feels incredible. And when I said I'm really resonating with my womanhood, it's because of the conversations I've had these last few months with my mom, with the women in my family, and with the young girls in my family who are dealing with a whole different level of pressure. Because I do remember a time where there was no social media, and thank God I had that time, because the kids growing up now, they have social media at their fingertips, and it's so hard on them. Like I really feel for the generation that has grown up on social media and have a very different level of expectations. But there's one of my favorite songs is Expectations, actually, by Wale. And he raps about like all of these procedures that are being fed to women and all these different like Ozempic and, you know, BBLs and this, not no shade to women who do have that. But I also think that all of these narratives are pushed on women to make them feel worthy, right? To make them feel like they never have to age, to make them feel like they could be a pseudo model on Instagram. Like there's so many things placed on women. And I'm not sitting here and saying I'm not one of them. Sometimes I flirt with the idea myself, but I remind myself that my body is not a trend. My face is not a trend. My body is not meant for the male gaze. My body is a sacred temple. And how do I want to take care of my temple? How do I want to preserve it? How do I want to protect it? And again, outside of those external stimuli, as you mentioned, like, how do I want to protect this? And at the end of the day, I don't want to do any of that shit because I don't want it. I don't want to put it in my body. So that's the decision I come to. But when you are constantly faced with these expectations, societal and cultural, and these young girls that I see in my family are starting to like buy into it, flirt with the ideas, I'm like, how can I be that woman in their life that reminds them that they're beautiful, right? That reminds them that their bodies are not trends, that what really matters is how fine you are, how your soul, like your heart, your compassion, like all of that is the shit that makes you so beautiful. And so how do I remind them of that? Because I wish someone would have told me when I was younger, just as my mom is telling me now.
I'm going to text you a very beautiful film called Long Line of Ladies that I think you will love based on this. It's about women and rites of passage. I also want to connect you with my friend Rita Moretti. I think you two should chat. She has this beautiful community of women and women talking about what you're talking about, and you know, like just
yes, connections.
Yeah. So it's really beautiful. So I'll connect you two. You two should chat. Okay. Final thoughts. I'll give you one final thought. Whenever I do silent retreat, one of the practices is to hide your mirrors because it's not about you. You know, and the more you realize it's not about you,
you're telling a Leo it's not about me. Just kidding.
You know, like it is that our face is beautiful because our soul is clean. You know, like, you know, not clean in the sense of no sins. It's just like we know we're loving, we're compassionate, like we are beautiful. Like, let me tell you something. When someone who don't look in the mirror that much but walks into a space and they're present and they're kind, you feel that energy. You want to be around that. It's so great. It's like, man, that love does radiate, you know, that, and it's just love. It's not love for a thing. It's just love. And I think we forget that when we meet someone, we think they're the reason we can love in this way. No, they're just a vehicle that reminded you that you are the gas, you know, like you always had the ability to go.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think the last thing I'll say is that, the way you speak to yourself matters, right? The way that when you look in the mirror, I was doing this meditation for a while. It's TMI, but it's actually one that's inspired by Alicia Keys, who is just soulful. But she had this meditation that she shared of staring at herself naked in the mirror until her thoughts became kind thoughts. And as a woman, I'm sure as a man as well, it's so hard to look at yourself in the mirror and not judge, like, ooh, I need to maybe like stop eating baleadas or like not eat a lot of, like, you know, calories, you know, whatever the thoughts may be, or like, oh my God, my eye looks weird, or oh my God, blah, blah, blah. Like all those thoughts start to come, the humanness starts to come. And then how do you start to practice kindness to yourself? How do you look at yourself and say, girl, that face, that skin looks amazing. You did your face routine. Like, how do you start to compliment yourself and really love again the temple you're in? Because when you start to speak to yourself with love and compassion, you free up this energetic capacity to focus on other things that are important in life. Whether it's maybe you want to read a book, maybe you don't want to post on Instagram, maybe you want to dive into a project, maybe you want to spend time with family. Like, when we clear up that mental and energetic space to just be, to exist, I think that's part of the liberation. And it starts with a little bit of compassion and kindness with oneself.
Preach, received, loved. Amen. Ashe. Anything else you want people to know? How they can hang out with you? What they can learn? Yeah, all the things.
They can hang out with me every few weeks on Hella Latino podcast. You'll listen to me and another guest, or you could just follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram. That's where I'm most active. But yeah, come chill with me on either of those platforms. And yeah, you'll hear more of these amazing conversations. Thank you. Thank you for the space. Such a beautiful, beautiful questions that you have. Such an art.
Thanks. Anything else? You good?
I'm good.
Peace.